Have you or a loved one recently been arrested for a serious crime?
Is your professional reputation at risk?
Aggressive representation from a qualified defense attorney can help you avoid conviction and keep your reputation untarnished.
Hi, I'm Charles McGill, and I'll fight for your rights. With extensive experience in successfully defending against a wide range of criminal offenses and high-profile cases, you can rest assured that you'll get the fair trial you deserve from McGill, Guzman McGill. Call us at 559-255-3425 or visit us online at toplawyersfresno.com.
Hi, I'm John Malice. Welcome to this live edition of Connect with Me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this day. It's a Thursday morning. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's not a very easy one to stomach. We're going to talk about sex and human trafficking. 436-ME-TV, option 11. I do believe that our friend Charles Chuck McGill is our sponsor today. Isn't he that defense attorney that was here last week or something? Yeah, I think so. Anyway, Chuck is a good friend. He's our sponsor today. We're back with more in a moment.
Tonight I want to discuss the importance of the television medium to the American people.
Back here on the program live on Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno on a Thursday morning. A couple of programming notes, and that is that tomorrow we're going to be on tape. I will not be here. I have to go in for a little medical procedure tomorrow. No big deal, I don't think. If I don't show up on Monday, you'll know what happened. Anyway, on Monday's program, you will find that we will have a very interesting program. Mark Sheeran recently came back from Bonn, Germany, and talking about media access to everything around the world. And he went to this conference that took place last month. We'll talk to Mark Sheeran about that. He is the owner and the CEO of Ventura Broadcasting. That'll take place on Monday, and another interesting show on Tuesday. So here we go with today's program, which is sponsored by Charles Chuck McGill. He is an attorney at law. And a topic that is very difficult to talk about, but one that we should address head on and face it head on each and every day, because it is real. And I got to talk about sex trafficking, human trafficking. It's kind of all in one basket. It's one and the same. So it's really roughly estimated that about 20 to 30 million sex slaves are transported from point A to point B to point C around the world each year. 20 to 30 million around the world. In this country, they cross across our borders into this country about 600,000 to 800,000 per year. Right here in the Central Valley, it is a huge, major problem. Not sure what the numbers are, but because here the valley is so closely located to Highway 99, we have a high poverty rate here. Sex crimes, human trafficking, sex trafficking is a high crime and a high dollar business. But there is one organization right here in the Central Valley called Breaking the Chains. It's an organization that works with law enforcement, both local, federal, and state law enforcement agencies, to try to round up these criminals who are using these young girls as sex objects. And that's the only way I can describe it right now. It's an organization that helps get them off the street, gets them out of that situation, puts them in a home, gets some counseling, and they try to rebuild their lives. Here is a little small clip. It's about 2.5 minutes long of Breaking the Chains and what this organization does and what it's all about.
So Breaking the Chains is very near and dear to my heart. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and childhood abandonment. I found myself on the streets at a very young age. My mother was involved in a drug addiction. Blessed by God, she's better now. And I would see the girls sitting on the side of the road, standing there, and my heart hurt for them.
Tiffany came and pulled me aside from church, said, "Hey, got to talk to you," and just grabbed me and just said, "You know, this is my heart."
And she came to my home and she shared her story one night.
I met a man who seemed like a dream come true. He was very handsome, very flashy, and invited me to a trip to Los Angeles. Unfortunately, shortly after arriving in Los Angeles, we checked into a hotel and everything changed, and I spent the next 10 months in a nightmare.
Once I got to know more about her and her story, things just happened and things just clicked.
And as she began to pour out her heart, it was almost the mere version of what the burden that was placed on my heart.
And the more that we reached out, the more that we saw the need here locally, and we just kind of ran with it.
We historically have treated many of the girls that are out there on the streets involved in the sex trade, prostitution, as suspects, when the reality is they are victims.
Investigators now take a role, and we sit down and we talk about with that individual about what life is about.
Our number one goal is to rescue girls off the street, so we have a variety of ways we do that, but our number one goal is to try to locate and find the girls that are being trafficked.
If they have contact with the girl or whatever, then they'll refer them to us and we'll meet with them, sit down with them, and let them know about our services and how we can help.
And the reason Breaking the Change is such a powerful organization is because they have a heart for these women.
Live in our studio right now is Debra Wood. She is the co-founder of Breaking the Chains. It's an organization that helps these victims get off the street. 436-ME-TV, option 11. Very tough topic to tackle here today, but one that we should face head-on each and every day. You can call in, you can weigh in. We'll be here for the full hour from 10 to 11 o'clock here this morning. Our program today is sponsored by Charles Chuck McGill. He is an attorney at law.
Have you or a loved one recently been arrested for a serious crime?
Is your professional reputation at risk?
Aggressive representation from a qualified defense attorney can help you avoid conviction and keep your reputation untarnished.
Hi, I'm Charles McGill, and I'll fight for your rights. With extensive experience in successfully defending against a wide range of criminal offenses and high-profile cases, you can rest assured that you'll get the fair trial you deserve from McGill, Guzman McGill. Call us at 559-255-3425 or visit us online at toplawyersfresno.com.
Does your wheelchair make it difficult to reach the dining table at restaurants or at home? The portable tabletop extension from Quality of Life Products is the answer. This sturdy, American-made product extends over your lap so you can enjoy your meal without spilling food on yourself. It comes with a lifetime warranty and sells for just $49.95. And the plate rotator helps anyone with limited hand mobility to spin their plate to the item they want to eat. Just $19.95. You can get both for just $59.95 plus shipping. Go to our website, yqol.biz, or call 460-3090.
Back here on the program, 436-ME-TV, option 11. And so a topic that is very difficult to talk about. We've touched on it before here on this program with a pastor that came in from Modesto not too long ago. It was actually late last year. We talked about the sex trafficking trade, and that's exactly what it is. It's a billion-dollar business around the world. There's no question about that. Debra Woods is here. She's one of the co-founders of Breaking the Chains. Debra, welcome to the program. And not only are you a co-founder, but you are also a victim. So let's start with the organization first. Tell us about what you do, how it was formed, when it was formed, and what do you do to help these victims?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having us today.
Oh, no
As an
problem.
advocate, I love to have any and every opportunity to be able to spread awareness. So Breaking the Chains was formed based off of my own experiences. So I am not only a victim, I'm the child of a victim. So sex trafficking, if you will, has been a huge part of my life from the day I was born. My mother is also a victim. My mother spent over 30 years out there in the streets. And so, needless to say, and to kind of make it a very intense and long story short, as a teenager, I found myself entrapped in the same snare that she had been entrapped in. And this is kind of what we...
Which is what scenario? What kind of scenario is that? Because for those of us
Right.
who are, I mean, this is like, this is totally foreign to me. I've never been involved in something like this, obviously, and am not familiar with how this thing works. So explain.
Well, in actuality, every story for almost every woman is different, just as it would be for any type of abuse or domestic violence situation. However, the one part and the one fact that really is the center is that a vulnerability within an individual is exploited. And that's what happened in my situation. The vulnerability in my life was my mother. I was raised in a very wonderful home. I had a father who told me every day that he loved me. I was not abused. I was raised with a wonderful set of morals and standards. However, as a teenager, I began to rebel, and I went to go and be with my mother. My family it was the early 90s. There was no idea about what human trafficking was. Nobody even really realized that it existed or there was any type of victimization going on for these girls. And it was actually at that time becoming such an intense situation because traffickers were manipulating these girls left and right, and nobody was the wiser about it. So as I went to stay with my mother, I became entrapped in that realm, if you will. And so I met a man who I thought was going to be a boyfriend.
Wait a minute, you met a man while you were staying with your mom because your mom was entrapped in that situation at the same time?
Yeah, she wasn't. She was a part of that lifestyle. So it's just kind of, it's the scenario where you are involved in that group. I was around that world. I was in the realm, kind of like how we keep our children away from sex offenders and things of a nature. We don't want our children to be in the grasp of somebody who can hurt them or harm them, manipulate them, abuse them. So because she had been entrapped in that life, and when I say entrapped, my mother had a long history of drug abuse, sex trafficking, that dated back to her early teenage years. And so these were people.
So you met a man there?
I did. I met a man.
While you were with your mom?
I did.
Was it maybe the same man who abused your mother?
No, not at all. At this point in time, and so actually, if I could back up a little bit and say this, one of the biggest myths that we have is that prostitution and sex trafficking are two different things. Okay? So according to the Department of Justice, the average age into sex trafficking is between 12 and 14 years old. So between 12 and 14 years old, young girls become coerced, manipulated through force, fraud, or coercion into sex trafficking. What we end up seeing is adult women, and this is what we see, kind of the tip of the iceberg. An iceberg is under the water, and you don't see this massive problem that's underneath. You just see the tip floating. And so the tip of what we see is these women who are adults, who are abusing drugs on the streets, and from what
Are these women homeless?
We see them in all, it just depends. It's all forms. We typically view them as they're out there on their own. They are, at this point, usually very degraded and just very
what are they
falling
for?
apart. They're lost. They're hopeless. I mean, you can only experience the human body, the human psyche can only experience so much trauma. And so what we don't see is these minors, kind of like Operation Dog Track that happened just a few months ago, where we had these gangs who were trafficking minors and other girls, and all this was happening behind the scenes. This wasn't something that we were seeing as a public. We don't see 12 and 13 14 and 15-year-old girls walking down the street soliciting themselves. Where we see this happening at is on the back page of our internet, in seedy hotel rooms just out of sight, where nobody knows that this is occurring. But the problem is that what happens psychologically to these women after this intense degradation and abuse? They fall apart. The only way to deal with that is through anesthetizing.
So I'm interested in what happened with this man here that you came across. What happened?
So coming back to that point is my mother was now an adult, and so she had found herself in this situation where every day was just constant drug abuse and just numbing out all the abuse that had happened to go on. And in this realm of this world was where I met a trafficker. And so I went to Los Angeles with this person. This person had promised me a better lifestyle, had promised me that I was going to make a lot of money, and I was going to just simply go and entertain some gentlemen. And looking back, of course, with what we know now, you would think, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Like, why would you go along with this? But again, there was no idea of what human trafficking was. This was something that was for a teenager, for someone who thinks they know everything, who thinks they got the world figured out, who is naive, who believes that nothing could ever harm them and nothing bad could ever happen to them.
And how old were you?
At this time, I was just over 18 years old. I had just turned 18 at this time. And I left to Los Angeles. Shortly upon arriving there, I was taken into a motel room. Condoms were tossed my direction, and I was told that what the entertaining was going to entail. That's where my nightmare began. So at that point, there was no backing out. There was...
Why not?
What ended up occurring after that was so traumatic that it comes back to me in... it's very difficult still for me to talk about. It comes back in almost still shots. Because from my understanding, from what I was told at that point in time, was that too much time and money had been invested, and that this was pimpin' B, and I wasn't wasting their time or their energy in what they had set up for me. Again, it's almost unimaginable.
So your life was threatened?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, some
They
very
said if you
horrible
tried to
things.
leave, we'll kill you.
I went through some very horrible things. I was raped. I was physically assaulted. I was severely abused for quite a period of time after that. So, again, to get a better understanding of what we see, I ended up leaving that lifestyle, and I spent almost 2 years trying to rebuild my life. I went back to my family. I had told my family what had happened, and they all rallied around me. I have an amazing father, amazing uncles and aunts who again...
And your mom is where at this point?
My mom is doing well. Me and my mother have a great relationship.
She's out of it, out of that lifestyle or situation?
Yes, I've helped her get out of that lifestyle, that
Okay.
situation.
Okay.
But for somebody who doesn't know any different, who spends, again, that's why awareness is so important, is for 30 years to not even realize that you're a victim, to truly believe that this is your fault, that this is who you are, to bear that scarlet letter, to think there is nothing else in life, to be in a place, and I know that place all too well, to feel like you are lower than the scum of the earth. It's an unimaginable place to be mentally.
Yeah. All right. We're talking with Debra Wood. She is the co-founder of Breaking the Chains, and we'll talk more with her about how she got out of that situation, and we'll talk about what you can do to help these young women avoid this situation, or the ones that are in it right now maybe get out of it. And we'll also talk about why it's such a huge industry right here in the Central Valley. It's big, big money. And from what I understand, just some of the research I've done, reportedly this sex trafficking stuff generates about $32 billion a year around the world. Just think about that, $32 billion. Supposedly, that's 3 times the amount that Donald Trump is worth. Supposedly, Trump's worth about $10 billion. Well, think about this. This sex trafficking generates $32 billion a year. Charles Chuck McGill is our sponsor today. We're back with our program in a moment.
Have you or a loved one recently been arrested for a serious crime?
Is your professional reputation at risk?
Aggressive representation from a qualified defense attorney can help you avoid conviction and keep your reputation untarnished.
Hi, I'm Charles McGill, and I'll fight for your rights. With extensive experience in successfully defending against a wide range of criminal offenses and high-profile cases, you can rest assured that you'll get the fair trial you deserve from McGill, Guzman McGill. Call us at 559-255-3425 or visit us online at toplawyersfresno.com.
Frigidaire. We introduced the first home freezer, the first pulsator agitator washer, and now we introduce the Frigidaire Orbit Clean dishwasher, designed with a unique wash arm that gives you 4 times more water coverage for a consistently better clean. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
Back here on the show, connect with me on MeTV Fresno, 436 MeTV option 11, sex trafficking. Very difficult topic to tackle here, but we're trying our best. Caller, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Let me ask your guest, the 12, 13, and 14-year-old young girls in this field, who takes care of them as far as their dressing? And I don't know if they have people like doctors or anything to after something like that. I'm kind of interested because the young girls are manipulated because they've been told, well, I'll take care of you, you know, on this, and your mom and dad, and you'll have a better life. It's, you know, when young girls at this age, and especially if they, let's put it this way, who run away and all that, are the easy targets. And in your case, you know, you learned that you had a great family. They were supportive and all that, but not all families are like that. But how can you, if I was seeing some young girl doing that, and I know a lot of them where they get into the gangs and all that, and they're provided this and that, would I be best to let the police department or someone else, hey, this is what's going on in this area or whatever? Do you think that's right? That's really what I want to know. Thank you.
Well, in actuality, this is a community issue. So definitely notifying the proper authorities that something is occurring and that you suspect something should be our first step. Because these individuals, advocates, police department, law enforcement, social workers, they're being trained daily to identify this, to provide the type of resources and services that these individuals need. And I really like that question, because that's what we're here about today, is that we need to take action. Too many times and too often we don't ask the question, is something else going on?
I want to ask you, when you're stuck in that situation, and reverting back to the early 90s when you were caught in that you know, that spider web, I mean, did your, and I want to call them captors, that's basically what they were.
Absolutely.
They were captors.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
they kidnapped you.
Yes.
They were your captors. You were being held hostage.
Yes.
I mean, how are you being fed? How are you being dressed? How are your health needs being taken care of? Any of that come into play?
So there's two different types of trafficking. You have your Romeo trafficking, and so this is where a woman is mentally manipulated, and so these women will protect their captors with everything in them. So we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. And then my situation, which is actually something we don't see as often here domestically, but obviously still occurs as I sit and breathe and sit here, is that captivity, that force, that fraud. Again, at that time, because there was no knowledge, I believed this was my fault. I apologize. I stuttered a lot in the beginning. Talking about my story is very difficult for me. I still carry a lot of shame and a lot of burden from that. However, what I will say this is, I was a runaway. I was rebellious. And this is where a lot of girls find themselves.
A lot of kids are. I was rebellious too. I didn't get caught
But they
up in
believe
that.
it's their fault. And they don't understand that there is something else, that they are not prostitutes.
But here's the question that I have, and not to sound like I'm not putting any blame on
Right,
anybody.
right.
But there are a lot of kids that are rebellious. A lot of teenagers are very rebellious.
Right.
Okay, but they don't end up in situations like this. So what I'm wondering is, as an uneducated person in this field, okay, in this arena, how do you get caught up in that? Even if you are rebellious, because there are so many that are rebellious that don't.
A vulnerability is exploited. Typically, so as human beings, at our essence, our most foundational need is to be loved, to be affirmed, to be accepted. It's the same reason.
You were looking for love in the wrong places.
Right.
That's what it boils down to?
That's what it boils down to. The same reason that young men join gangs.
Okay.
They're looking for that affection. They're looking for that acceptance. And because that is our most basic necessity, we will sacrifice almost anything to obtain that.
To get it. That's right. And to keep it. And so what about all these needs that basic human needs? Were your basic human needs taken care of during this time that you were being held captive?
Absolutely. You know, in actuality, what ended up happening is somewhere, and I'm going to say it's
So you were allowed to go out and do your hair. You were allowed to go take a shower. You were allowed to go grocery shopping.
Well, after a while. So there, with my situation, and they actually have, they call it a breaking process, almost like you would a horse. And it's disgusting how many horse and animal terms they use when they're trafficking women. So it was called a breaking process. So after I went through my breaking process, which was a few weeks long, then just like a man in a domestic violence or somebody who abuses a child, I started to be given things. I started to be given nice clothes, given food, treated with affection, and started to become groomed, or attempted. They attempted to groom me into the situation. And this is where it is so important as a community that fathers step into the lives of their children, that we as a community begin to build the moral values and the moral baseline of our children. Because I could not be broken emotionally to believe that this is what it means to be loved. I didn't stay in that situation.
So your basic needs were taken care of.
Yes.
Okay, you were allowed to do that.
Yes.
But in the back of your mind the whole time, did you have any opportunities to escape?
I left 4 times that I remember.
Oh, you did?
And within 24 hours I was found. I was beaten and I was brought back.
How did they find you?
There was so for me, the first 2 times.
4 times.
Right.
You escaped.
I escaped. I got away.
And they found you.
I went right back to the
goodness.
place where I started. There was so much shame associated and so much, and again, this was the 90s. It's not where I didn't realize that I was a victim. I felt like, and let me finish this part. I felt like I had been warned to stay away from my mother. I had been warned to stay away from that lifestyle. I had been warned that I would turn out just like her. All my rebellious, all my acting out, all my running away. I dropped out of school. I had a child by the time I was 16. I believed that all this, just like a woman stuck in a domestic violence, was my fault. I was too ashamed. You cannot be raped on the level, and that's what it is, on a daily basis. This is why women don't report rape. I didn't want to go back to the family that honored and cherished me and adored me, who told me that this is what would happen if I did what I did, and tell them.
You didn't want to hear, I told you so.
I didn't even want to deal with it. It's honestly, it's so hard to put. It's so tragic. It's so unbelievable. The worst abuse, the worst traumatic event that any human being can experience is sexual. And that's across the board. Studies for years have shown that.
So when you escaped, you were recaptured, you were beaten.
Yes.
But you did it again and again, 4 times over.
I was brought back. Yeah, my life was
back.
Yeah, I didn't think there was any way out, and it wasn't actually.
Tell us how you got out then. In 1999, you got out.
Yes. In actuality, it was. I will have to say, I am faith-based, and it was the love of Christ. I always joke and say the devil didn't check my resume and I go back to that because I had an amazing family. I had an amazing father. I have people who poured into me. They could not break me. There was only one choice. There was to kill me or to finally let me go. I had been raped while I was out there. And it's kind of a series of events that got me out. And so I found myself pregnant. I had found comfort in law enforcement. Law enforcement had realized that.
How were you found, though? How were you discovered?
I ran away. I jumped into a car with a John, and I was at a point where I wanted to die. So I didn't care if they found me. I didn't care if I lived or I died.
Okay.
And I was raised in a Christian home, so I wasn't going to kill myself. Essentially, it's almost like suicide by cop, right? This was going to be, for lack of a better term,
you jumped in the car.
Suicide by pimp. So I jumped in the car, and I told this John, I'll do whatever you want.
Just get me out of here?
Just get me out of here. I got into, he got me a ticket and a Greyhound from that town, and I got back to Fresno, terrified the whole way. When I got here, I went straight to the police department.
And that was in 1999.
That was in 1999.
Yeah, and I think, let's see, 1999, it was, Ed Winchester was a police chief at that time. Jerry Dyer was, I think, an assistant chief or the public information officer. So a little bit different setup. But Jerry Dyer, you work closely with him now.
Absolutely.
So he knows your whole story.
He does.
And but this has helped give you strength and courage to raise your children.
Well, absolutely. What's the situation, and I really want to kind of move into that area. What this did for me was that I spent 2 years trying to rebuild my life. And 2 years later, what is even going to be more astounding after telling you all that is I returned on my own to that lifestyle, and I began to traffic myself. And I spent 8 years trapped in an addiction, soliciting myself. And this is where we see these women. You're
talking about, this is after 1999.
This is after 1999.
So you spent 2 years of recovery.
In 2002, I returned to Fresno. I had been transported to a safe location. I had attempted to rebuild my life. I became general manager at Papa John's Pizza in the Sacramento area, and I was running multiple stores. And one night, somebody came in, and I have what I know now to be a PTSD flashback. And for whatever reason, which seems totally crazy now, but was reality then, I believed that they were coming for me. And I abandoned my store in the evening and hid in the back of the store and left everything open. And of course, I was fired. Within a matter of, I'm going to say, a very short period of time, because again, this is, 17 years ago, a neighbor offered me some methamphetamine. And for the first time in that 2-year period, I no longer was afraid. I numbed out. I did what all these women are doing that are experiencing this type of abuse. I anesthetized. I became numb. And the thing is that our minds, if we cannot deal with what happens, if it's not explained to us, if we do not receive the proper counseling and therapy, if we don't interject into these women's lives, they assume that role. So it's like a pit bull puppy that turns into a pit bull.
So after 2002, and you abandon your job, what happened to you?
Well, let me go back to let me give you a better idea. So you have a pit bull and a pit bull puppy. So I was that puppy when I was trafficked. Kind, cuddly, cute, innocent. But after so much abuse, I became rabid. I didn't understand my environment. I took that scarlet letter that had been placed upon me, because nobody was saying human trafficking victim. Nobody, law enforcement, nobody was saying, we're so sorry that this happened to you. How could? It was simply a runaway girl who ran out, who got wrapped up with the wrong guy, and who was a prostitute. So you know what I did? I did what I do best, what is in me, and what brings me into the leadership role that I am today. I became the best that I could be. And it's a ghetto term, they say go hard or go home. And that's what happened. I assumed that, and I began to believe that this is who I was. And so this is what we see. We see this out there in the street.
So you went back into that world?
Yes.
For how long?
In and out for about 8 years.
From 2002 to when?
I got out in 2008, so maybe it wasn't quite 8 years.
Okay.
December of 2008.
6 years.
Mm-hmm. And so what we see and what we do at Breaking the Chains is we provide shelter and restoration services. So
we're going to talk about that, yeah.
Right.
We're going to talk about, we have a whole half hour left, but we're going to get into that in this next half hour, but go ahead.
And we begin to unwrap that manipulation that I've just explained that you've seen in my life, that was in the life of my mother, and that's in the life of hundreds of women today, and men, and children. We begin to help break down those walls and help them see who they really are.
Man, what an incredible story. So what I do need to get from you after the break here is how you got out of this in 2008, because it sounds like you were in it, got out of it, went back, fell back 2 or 3 steps, were in it for 6 years, and then how did you get out of it again? We'll talk about that after the break. Charles Chuck McGill is our sponsor today. We'll also talk about what Breaking the Chains does to help these victims. 436-MeTV, option 11. Back in a moment.
Have you or a loved one recently been arrested for a serious crime?
Is your professional reputation at risk?
Aggressive representation from a qualified defense attorney can help you avoid conviction and keep your reputation untarnished.
Hi, I'm Charles McGill, and I'll fight for your rights. With extensive experience in successfully defending against a wide range of criminal offenses and high-profile cases, you can rest assured that you'll get the fair trial you deserve from McGill, Guzman McGill. Call us at 559-255-3425 or visit us online at toplawyersfresno.com.
If you have a need to promote your business or event, please consider MeTV Fresno for your next campaign. MeTV reaches over 100,000 of your potential customers in the Fresno area every single week. Plus, you can rest assured that your commercial is running in the greatest family-friendly programs of all time. MeTV Fresno delivers a strong, loyal audience ready to buy, and your campaign will cost a fraction of what you're paying for your advertising now. Call me today to find out how affordable MeTV is at 905-1925.
I don't think any one person, unless they've been in that situation, could truly understand what it's like to look another human being in the face when you are filled with so much shame, so much regret.
So many of them are forced into this lifestyle and cannot get out.
The numbers are staggering, and there's more and more girls every year that are trafficked.
And if they do come to the light of day saying this is not for me and I don't want to go back, that's when the force will come into it, the beatings,
And so if they actually come across the girl that is in desperate need or dire need right then and there, they immediately call us, and then we just go into action.
Because Fresno has some key elements that make it the perfect storm, if you will, for trafficking, it's become one of the largest trafficking areas in our nation.
The offenders in human trafficking, they know who they're looking for, and they seek primarily young women is the highest target out of it.
What is more scary is that now, with the addition of the internet and social media, trafficking is virtually in every town in America.
Right now, realistically, there is no government funding for adult women in human trafficking. And that's why our heart is drawn towards the adult population, is because we want to go out and help them, because they don't necessarily have the resources that minors have or that anyone else have. And unfortunately, in these types of situations, it's in a moment that you need to help them.
Everybody might see them as prostitutes, but I have a lot of friends out there.
We have to be willing to put our arms around them and to rescue them. And that's what Breaking the Chains does.
I just feel that we need to let them know that they're worth more, that they're loved, and this is not what they were made for.
I have a lot of girls that, although I haven't seen them in 10 years, and although it was under the most seedy of circumstances, I love these women.
And when you make somebody a part of the team to do a good thing for others, it empowers you to a little bit of higher calling, and I've seen that in some of these women.
So everything that we do is because of the community support.
Clothing, anything of any kind of in-kinds helps us tremendously, especially when we're trying to stay privately funded.
Your prayers, and of course financially.
If you would just commit to us for like 10, 20 bucks a month,
so that they can continue rescuing these ladies from a life of prostitution and being sexually trafficked.
Everything that we are able to do for these women is because of everyone else's heart to give and to serve. So the best thing you can do is just pick up the phone and say, how can I help you?
All right, back here on the program. That was just a little portion of what you can see online at the website, Breaking the Chains, and it explains the organization. Chief Dyer is on the board of directors. It's a 501c3, this organization. It's a nonprofit that helps these victims. And Debra Woods is here. She is one of the co-founders, a victim herself. And I want to, CNN recently aired a special on human sex trafficking, and this is what was said by one of the people on that program. It says, what we know about sex crimes is that it's not about sexual pleasure, it's about control. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
This one person went on to say, what's similar to some of these girls is that I work with is their self-esteem or lack thereof. You either become vulnerable to a man on the street or a man that you meet in school. You become vulnerable because you are looking for nothing more than attention. True?
No.
That's not true?
I wouldn't say. I guess I wouldn't agree with the exact quote.
Okay.
That can be taken out of context. They are looking not for attention, but for affection, for affirmation, for someone to care.
Kind of in the same family there.
It is in the same family. I guess I'm a stickler for words. I know how they can be manipulated and twisted. But definitely for affection, definitely for affirmation, definitely for acceptance and for love. And that's where the trauma bonding occurs.
Yeah.
The same as a child will protect and love the parent that abuses them.
Department of Homeland Security defines human trafficking as a modern-day form of slavery involving illegal trade of people for exploitation and commercial gain. You agree with that?
Absolutely.
There's a victim that they interviewed on CNN when they did their special on sex and human trafficking. The victim was quoted as saying in the piece, "One day I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was in so much pain. I had sex with almost 40 guys in one day."
Right. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
That's not shocking to you, though.
Not at all. Not at all. Unfortunately, for too long and for too many people, that's the norm, and it's not shocking. What's more shocking is that it's happening all around us, and we're barely realizing it.
Yeah, and she went on to say, I was so tired, I said to them, I can't do this anymore. The trafficker, he didn't care. He went into the next room, pulled out a gun, and said, if you go somewhere where we'll see. I guess that means you're dead.
Absolutely. It's almost like, if you think about it. So if you think about going into the cartel, right? If I walked into the home of a cartel and I took 50 kilos off of his coffee table, he's probably going to come after me. They're probably not going to take that very lightly. And we would not be shocked as a society as to the depravity and the depths that person would go to retrieve that. That's the same thing whenever you take a woman, or when a woman walks away from these traffickers. You can sell a bag of drugs one time, but you sell a woman over and over and over again. She is a commodity. She is his way of life. She is his way of living, and he'll protect that with deadly force.
Can they use this commodity, or this human being, as they refer to as a commodity, for over a period of years?
Until they're just a worthless vessel, until they're nothing but like a walking zombie. And that's what we see and that's where breaking the chains heart is with these adult women that unfortunately society has felt is a lost cause, and that they may be out there on their own, or because once they are no longer of any value, then we see them discarded on the side of the road, and they're begging for money, and they're turning dates for, next to nothing. It's not this glamorous lifestyle that is perpetrated in rap songs and social media. That is the reality of what happens and what the result of sex trafficking is.
All right.
It is horrible. It's a nightmare.
So in 2008, when you got out of the situation for a second time, how did you escape?
Jesus Christ. A strong foundation of love and the hope of Christ. Okay. I was arrested on December 25th, Christmas Day of 2008, and I was looking at a very lengthy prison sentence. Like I said, I became a predator.
Well, how did you get out of that sentence?
Well, the prey became the predator. So I no longer, because that's what happens out there. That's also, I want to kind of say this too, is that with some of these women, is you either eat or get eaten. I evolved into something very dark and very ugly.
So how did you get out of this in 2008?
I fell on my knees, and I fell at the base of my Savior right there in a holding cell, and I said, you know what, God, if you will take me, if you're even listening, if there's any possibility in this realm of this universe that you still see me, help me. And it was supernatural intervention.
How long did it take
Immediately.
You? But to get back on your feet, how long did it take you? So you avoided prison. Avoided prison.
I avoided prison. I ended up getting a 6-month sentence and being released by a very gracious judge, who I will quote as saying, as he tapped the folder and said, I don't know why I'm doing this, who gave me leniency and mercy on a felony corporal spousal abuse, because I was triggered, PTSD. I had a man who came after me physically, and I snapped and physically attacked him with a knife. Okay. And so on that 6-month leniency, I would say, because I had no resources and I did it all through the church and through the grace of God, it took me a couple years to just really begin to work my way out of that situation. But once I made that change, there was no going back. I mean, my family has been amazing. They rallied around me. They began to help me. I got a job. And then one of the key reasons that we have Breaking the Chains is because I'm very inquisitive. So I immediately began trying to figure out why. The same question you ask yourself. Why did I go back? What happened to me? I'm no longer numb. I'm no longer on drugs. Now I'm feeling all these emotions. Why? Because I knew it wasn't my fault, but I needed to figure out how that happened.
Let's put up the picture of one of your co-founders here, or the co-founder, Tiffany Apodaca, and there she is.
Apodaca.
Right. Apodaca. Okay, I'm sorry. Apodaca. Tiffany Apodaca is the correct pronunciation of the name. She was part of this sex trafficking trade here. She was physically, emotionally, sexually abused. Her abuse started at the age of 4, according to the profile that I read online, and it continued for many, many years. She was a drug addict. She was homeless. How did you guys find each other?
So she was not a sex trafficking survivor. She was a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, as we see with so many women. Again, I'm going to say God. I'm going to say Christ brought us together. It was at church. And so I had planned some prayer walks, and I had began to start forming the foundation for Breaking the Chains. And I was at a Bible study, and
she was there?
She was the women's leader for that Bible study. Okay. And the door was opened, and I emotionally vomited a little bit about who I was, or not who I was, but my story. And this is why I was doing the prayer walks. And she immediately pulled me aside. She pulled me aside. Well, I shouldn't say immediately. Right then, following the Bible study, she had let me know that she needed to talk to me. As you've seen earlier in this program, after sharing my story, it can be very difficult for me. So I kind of, I left. I remember leaving the Bible study rather quickly. So she caught me at church at the very next service and poured her heart out. And it was the mirror image. It was basically we were both being burdened with the same vision. Yeah. And we came together. We united and formally began breaking the chains.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and talk more about breaking the chains here in just a moment. Charles Chuck McGill, our sponsor today.
Have you or a loved one recently been arrested for a serious crime?
Is your professional reputation at risk?
Aggressive representation from a qualified defense attorney can help you avoid conviction and keep your reputation untarnished.
Hi, I'm Charles McGill, and I'll fight for your rights. With extensive experience in successfully defending against a wide range of criminal offenses and high-profile cases, you can rest assured that you'll get the fair trial you deserve from McGill, Guzman, McGill. Call us at 559-255-3425 or visit us online at toplawyersfresno.com.
Want to create something extraordinary? Create perfection. Our lifestyle appliances make it easy. KitchenAid, Ventura TV appliance, and you, when only the best will do.
Back here on the program, 436-MeTV Option 11, and we're here with Debra Wood. She's the co-founder of Breaking the Chains. So you started this organization with Tiffany when?
In 2014, in March of 2014.
And how was that? How did that come about? And let's get into that first and tell us what you guys do and how you guys help these victims.
And so really this, I was telling one of your producers earlier that this really, because of the need is so immense, it took a life of its own. Once we sat down and decided, you know, clearly this is what our vision is, this is what our heart is, we want a home, we want a shelter, we want to provide direct services. Doors just began to just swing open, and to be honest, it was almost a blur. We went and we applied for our 501c3. Within 3 months, we were approved by the state. Within 4 months of that, a home was donated to us. We began the remodeling process. Because of my relationship with the Fresno Police Department, I had already begun to reconnect with individuals there in law enforcement and trying to find out how we could help. And one of the reasons I did that is because I remember being out there. I remember being approached out on the street and having a church group tell me they were praying for me. And, you know, and I remember being very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very, cynical. And I remember looking at the lady, and I wish I hadn't then, but it was very real. My feelings were very raw. And I looked her dead in her eye, and I told her, I said, "Can I go home with you tonight?" I had 3 babies in a hotel room. I'm strung out on drugs. Rent was due within 3 hours. And I'll never forget just the shocked look on her face. Of course not. And that really was the motivation, that everything that we're doing here in the city is great, and we're raising awareness, and that had to come before this. But at some point, we have to take action. We have to go out. We have to help these women. We cannot simply tell them we understand and we're so sorry that you're a victim. But we need to take charge. We need to say, here's the counseling, here's a place to live.
How did this organization begin? How did you start it?
We went and applied for our 501c3.
Okay.
We were approved for our 501c3. We were surrounded by a network of churches and other people who are already in my life, who were a part of Tiffany's life. I had connections
donated
with
money?
Yes, they donated money. They donated a home. We have a child care. So we currently have a reception center, a child care center, 2 classrooms, a safe house, and a basically full functioning operational wraparound service
And so that
center.
money started coming in from the federal. Was it a federal or a state grant?
No, we are 100%. Everything that we do
no
is
federal grants, no state
federal or
grants.
state grants.
Basically, it was all
private foundation,
private foundations, private donations, and fundraisers.
Yes, and the church.
And the church. So as of now, you have how many locations?
Right now, we have 1 central location and 8 collaborative partners.
Okay, entail what the locations are and how you help these victims? You have a house?
So we have 3 phases. We have our rescue, relocate, restore. And so what this is this is where we work more closely with law enforcement, and we go in, and whenever a woman
This is not the safe house, right?
No, this is the 3 phases. So we go in, and we will get that call, as Tiffany was explaining in the video. We will go in and we will immediately help extract a woman from a high-risk situation, place her in a safe location, and provide for those needs and begin wraparound services.
How do you find out where this person is? How do you find out? Law enforcement knows,
It comes through various, all kinds of different types of referrals.
So
churches,
who goes in
families,
to rescue
law
the
enforcement.
police department?
Depending on the situation. It all depends on what the situation is.
Will you go along and help rescue?
I can't give too much information on that for our own safety and the safety of the girls that we help. Then we have our non-residential services. So this is services for women who have a place to stay, or they may be in other outside programs, and they're coming in and they're getting individual group therapy and individual counseling, as well as specialized resources. And some of those specialized resources may be help with getting their children clothes and food needs and different referrals for housing and things of that nature. Then we have the basis of what we started. We have our safe home. So this is Covenant House. Covenant House is only opened here recently, and Covenant House provides 5-bed placement locally for some of these women who have stayed in this life because they have nowhere else to go. And so we provide them with shelter services and intense therapy.
Only house
5 at a time, but we also have 8 collaborative partners. So we also have beds outside of Covenant House, confidential beds for our more high-risk victims.
How many?
I can't disclose that number.
Okay, but
it depends. It depends because it's collaborative.
More than 5.
Oh yeah,
it's much more than 5. So you can handle maybe up to 50, possibly.
It just depends on the resources with our collaborative partners and the bed space that's available at that time.
Yeah, and how? So what kind of services do you? How do you help them?
We haven't had to turn anybody away. That's the good news.
Okay, so once they're in the safe house, how do you help them? What do you do?
We provide full wraparound services. So we get help with getting their GED, job search, individual, like we said, group counseling, life skills. So we go over trauma bonding, PTSD, adverse childhood experiences, life skills classes. I mean, we have women that are just learning to cook, that are just learning to create a grocery list.
How old are the majority of these women?
So far to date, we have provided restorative services to 31 adult women and 2 minors.
2 minors, meaning under the age of 18?
Under the age of 18. Mm-hmm.
So they're probably, what, 12, 13, 14 years old?
Those are completely, I can't discuss those situations.
Yeah, but when you say adult, how old are the adults?
18 and above.
But are they in their 40s? Are they in their 20s?
It varies. It varies.
Really?
We see women exiting that, and that's where breaking the chains differs. Is sometimes it's easy to help the cute and the cuddly, right? But we're here if you've been a victim. And again, one of the bases that breaking the chains is really trying to pave the way in and really redefine is that all prostitution is sex trafficking. There is no difference. In all my experience that I have sat for the last 45 minutes, I have yet to meet a woman who did not enter through some form of force, fraud, or coercion. I have yet to meet a young woman, or a man for that fact, who just woke up one day and said, you know, I think I'm going to go flip a trick today. It takes an extreme amount of trauma for somebody to fall into that lifestyle. And all of that falls under the federal definition, force, fraud, or coercion. And so in that, we are trying to expand that definition. And if anybody has been victimized in any way, through any form of sex trafficking, we reach out and do our best to provide services.
All right, here's a question I have for you. Did you find that lifestyle to be addicting, kind of like a drug addict? And if so, what was the addiction? What was the attraction?
I did not. I do see that, and it's not as addiction. I think is definitely not the right terminology for it. It becomes more of a need.
But an addiction to that lifestyle.
I don't feel that these girls have an addiction to the lifestyle. Okay. I feel that they feel there is no other way out. There is nothing else. Unless you've been there, it's hard to explain the shame and the abandonment and the the hollowness that is felt. You almost cannot function because you believe there is no functioning outside that lifestyle. You don't want to be seen. I remember being in a point in my life where I didn't want to make eye contact with anybody outside of sex trafficking because of the shame I felt.
You're making good eye contact with me today.
That's the love of Jesus Christ.
Okay, so I read on your website that Fresno has 5 areas that are defined as sex trafficking hotspots. Can you name those 5?
Absolutely. We have the Parkway area, Motel Drive, Blackstone, Belmont, and G Street. Now with social media.
Name those again.
Parkway,
okay.
Motel Drive, Belmont, Blackstone, and G Street.
Those are the 5 hotspots for sex trafficking.
Those are the 5 hotspots that you'll see, but with social media, it's everywhere. It's in every home because it is now more rapid on the internet than it ever was before on the streets.
Right, right. So why is Fresno and the Central Valley such a hot spot?
Well, actually, we're located right smack dab almost in the middle of 2 of the nation's largest hotspots, which is Orange County and the Bay Area. Then you have the 99 corridor that runs right in between the 2 with a high poverty rate, and it just became the perfect storm for trafficking. But again, like I said, and I can't say this enough, being 2016, social media has brought it into every town. And I truly predict that if we do not intervene within the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be an epidemic in almost every town.
How many sex slaves in the Central Valley? How many do you estimate?
We've talked with some of the Vice Intel here, and we believe that there's probably somewhere in the area, but up to about 200 as we sit here and speak.
200 active sex slaves in the area that are being trafficked.
Absolutely.
Because
and I believe it's higher than that.
According to law enforcement numbers, about 800,000 come filtering through the country. They cross our borders each and every year. There's 20 to 30 million around the world.
Right.
So it's a much bigger problem outside our country than it is here, it seems like.
Well, actually, you've got to remember that those numbers that you're reading off are based on the federal definition. So the federal definition of human trafficking is numbers that are based on people that they can say they know are through force, fraud, or coercion. So if you actually think about all the people that we have not identified, all the adults that don't fit into that criteria because it hasn't been redefined yet, the numbers will triple.
Yeah.
So I venture to say there's 1 million plus sex slaves and people in the sex trafficking industry right here in America. I have full confidence in saying that today on the show.
1 million people who are
Definitely.
Involved in it?
Who are enslaved.
1 million people who are enslaved
Absolutely,
right now
here
in this
domestically.
country. How many would
Absolutely.
you say are enslaved in California?
It
You
would
said
just
about
depend.
200
I would say
here.
I triple. I would definitely double, at least double whatever the numbers are federally, because there's a lot of, when you talk about statistics and numbers.
So give me a number for California. How many are enslaved right now? Give me a number in your head.
I would just be randomly throwing a number out. I don't know. I would say there's at least 100,000 here in California.
Yeah, and about 200 here in the Central Valley.
About to. Well, that's according to the Vice. I believe that there's more than that.
There's more than 200 here in the
Absolutely.
Central
I
Valley?
think that's a safe guess because politically we want to have a safe guess, right? But I believe it's a lot higher than that.
And once again, give your phone number before we run out of time. If people are watching this program right now on Comcast TV, channel 375, you rescue, you relocate, you have shelters for the female victims, what's your number?
559-402-3955.
One more time, slowly.
559-402-3955.
Okay, so that's for any victim that might be watching in a hotel room right now on Comcast.
Yes.
Because a lot of these hotels and motels, they do have Comcast cable TV, and that's where we're broadcasting our show right now in 43.6 over-the-air broadcast. Deborah, come back again, and if you can, at some point, maybe bring Tiffany with you.
Absolutely.
It'd be good to have both of you on the show here at the same time. Good meeting you.
Thank you for having me.
And you've done a great job.
Thank
You've
you.
done a terrific job. I think you're a great role model.
Thank you.
All right. Deborah Woods, the co-founder of Breaking the Chains. Tomorrow, a tape program. Be back live with our guest, Mark Sheeran, on Monday. Have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Have you or a loved one recently been arrested for a serious crime?
Is your professional reputation at risk?
Aggressive representation from a qualified defense attorney can help you avoid conviction and keep your reputation untarnished.
Hi, I'm Charles McGill, and I'll fight for your rights. With extensive experience in successfully defending against a wide range of criminal offenses and high-profile cases, you can rest assured that you'll get the fair trial you deserve from McGill, Guzman, McGill. Call us at 559-255-3425 or visit us online at toplawyersfresno.com.